think I started to see myself be like, I want to be a really good artist manager, or I want to be best I can be at helping artists with their merchandise. But then I started to remember that that's not why I got into any of this. It wasn't to be a manager. It was almost the inverse.
If you're listening to this podcast right now, chances are you and I have a few things in common. One of which might be being a creative. And as a creative, there are some things we can't afford to lose out on, and a very big one is energy. But not just any energy, something clean and natural that doesn't leave you crashed out in the middle of your workday. That is honestly why I use Magic Mind. It's an amazing energy elixir that is about the size of a shot that I take every morning to guarantee that I am fully prepared for my day. It's filled with amazing ingredients like matcha, ashwagandha, and lion's mane to fully support your body throughout whatever your day has to offer. Right now, if you go to magicmind.com/procrastination-radio and use code procrastinator20, you can get up to 56% off your subscription for the next 10 days. That's procrastination-RadioShow 20. You can get 56% off your subscription in the next 10 days. Let's get energized together with Magic Mind. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Procrastination Radio Show. I'm Ian Complex, and we are back today with another very special guest and another very special conversation. Eric, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Good, man. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I wanted to start out. I know we spoke a little bit before we recorded, but I wanted to start out saying thank you because you were one of the very initial eye-opening moments in my kind of creative career, in my creative, I guess, finding my footing in what I'm doing now. Because working alongside Mickey Brown, who does say hello, um,
Mhm.
I was brought in to work on some stuff for Building Blocks, and at the time, I was fresh on this, so I think I had been a couple years into this,
Mhm.
and I just I think I didn't have a focus in a lot of ways. And I've spoken about this on another episode that's going to come out soon. But um, I think getting to meet you and getting to meet some of the other people you were working with, I kind of found some confidence in the fact that there were other people doing what I was doing and speaking with so much passion about it. And
Mhm.
caring so much about the craft and caring so much about communication, which you pointed out, and just having people, because that was something I didn't see outside of other people who were kind of around in my area. I just was like, okay, this is
Mhm.
maybe something I have to work to, or something that I have to, you know, kind of break down some doors to do. But it was really cool to see that people have been for so long just doing that work and being consistent with that and having that communication as the forefront. So I want to thank you for that before we get into anything else.
Oh, that makes me happy to hear.
So how you been?
I've been good.
Yeah,
In definitely maybe even like a year or so period of exploration, and
yeah,
I think I would say within the last year I've had a pretty big shift in terms of what work has looked like for me and what my approach
mm,
has kind of looked like towards it. And I feel I've spent a lot of the last year. I've been living in Los Angeles,
yeah,
but I'm from Chicago originally. I will be back there very soon as
yeah,
well. And but just spent some time, I think, kind of like recalibrating. I've been in the creative scenes at this point for almost 15 years, and
mm,
like a big chunk of that, about 10 or 12 of those, was kind of like a sprint towards a certain direction. And
yeah,
and after doing so so much work over so much time, with the kind of just with the momentum that had come to be from it all, I got to this point in the last couple years where I was like, all right, let me start to prepare for the next decade ahead,
mm,
and figure out how I want to contribute now. Because I think
mm,
a lot of what my work has looked like up to this date were things that where almost in service to things that really inspired me in my, teens and 20s, and like
Yeah.
had a really, fortunate experience to work with some great musicians and kind of get, pulled on that wave for about a decade.
Yeah.
And, kind of as I've started to like just get to a different point in my life and career, starting to think about like, what do I want to look like? What do I want this to look like moving forward? And like, how do I feel like I'm aging gracefully in this space? The things that
Yeah.
kind of like excited me when I was 22 are
Yeah.
different at 32 and stuff like
Right.
that. So, that's been a lot of the conversation for me in the last like few years. And, it's led to me reconcepting some projects and, putting some down and starting some up and collaborating differently and, you know, rolling up my sleeves and trying to get my hands like, a little more dirty with some software and
Yeah.
learning my own design skills, leveling up my own design skills.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of been the focus.
That's really interesting that you mentioned kind of shifting from some of the things that excited you when you were younger. I would love to hear this is kind of a two point question, but I would love to hear what in Chicago was capturing your interest at the time when you were younger, and kind of what
Mhm.
you thought maybe 10 years back, as you're saying now you're at a different place where you're moving towards the future. Kind of if you would share the reflections that you were having at this time, maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah. Um, it's interesting. Like, I feel like, again, given, spending the last year or two in like a really reflective kind of, point of view or like having those lenses on, I'm I'm definitely like identifying a lot of things that have been central to my inspiration or motivation since I was a kid. Like these things exist as strongly and firmly as they have the whole time. And then there's different aspects of it that, the dials have turned. But I think, really the way I was kind of like viewing the Chicago creative landscape when I was starting to enter it, which I would say is maybe around like 2010. Um, my point of view came from someone who was always very locally inspired by the art that was happening in the city. Like since I was younger, I was really like up on the artists that Chicago had to offer. Like obviously the mainstream legends that were coming out around that time, like Kanye and Lupe and so on. But also like a lot of people who were more, just never got that type of notoriety, but
Right.
we're still well respected within the city. My dad was involved in like the music and graffiti culture in Chicago for long time and still
Yeah.
is, and that was definitely like an informative. That was like a very informative like point of view that I had
Yeah.
access to early on, and that kind of really sparked my interest. And but like by the time I got to like get involved for myself, I was in college and like the city started to like really like come to life. I think it was one of those things where like it was also coinciding with this like natural shift in technology. Like
Mm.
I would say it's like kind of like the birth of the internet era of music and art. And I was like looking around and I was seeing like artists that I was like inspired by that were, my age, a few years younger than me, and like by the dozens though. Like every week I was finding new people, and it was like Chance and No Name and McJenkins and McMensa and Saba, and like the list went on and on. And there was this really cool like communal aspect that was happening where like I think it was like friendly competition. Like
Mm.
someone would show up like you know with a new record or a new album or a new video or just their performance style. Like someone would do something that was noteworthy, and like the audience around the city who was like paying attention to the stuff
Yeah.
was engaged and excited. And I think like there was just so much talent, and like no one wanted to get left behind. So we watched people like create like,
Yeah.
statement work after statement work, and like great creative collaboration,
Yeah.
like multiple times over. So for me, it was just like, I had this like, again, like I was already like indoctrinated into loving Chicago music and music
Right.
from the crib, and
Right.
like,
Yeah.
it was important to me already. And then like, finally having that like first opportunity to be like, oh wait, these are my contemporaries now, like
Right.
not just the ones I was looking up to as like a fan, where
Yeah.
there
That's
was that
cool.
disconnect still. And meeting these people and like understanding that like, oh, there's different things that I had developed through my own like creative pursuits, whether that was like web design, or like I was doing college radio at that point, or
Yeah.
I was starting to like interview artists for a music blog I had started. And those things kind of started to open up doors where it was like, oh, I could add value to what this artist is doing that I'm a
Right.
big fan of right now. And, because Chicago didn't have a ton of music industry infrastructure, um, and like I felt like all the rules were kind of getting like rewritten, like socials hadn't really taken hold yet,
Right.
streaming didn't exist yet. So, like,
Right.
the way that everyone, like, got the word out and got, their presentation together, like, looks different than it does in the current day.
Yeah.
And yeah, so like my point of view at that point was like, I'm excited, I believe in all these people. um, I felt like I started to see how I could like contribute effort and it be good for the things that I want to see flourish.
Right.
And it was like, let's get to work. And there was a bunch of those people, Pat Corcoran being one of the main people who, like,
Yeah.
around that time, um, him and I met and was just like, all right, we want to do the same things and help artists the same way. Like, um, how can we run towards that goal? And
Yeah.
yeah, that's where I was.
That's that's an amazing, an amazing storyteller. That was very, very engaging, and I think one of the points that I really latched onto was just how different of a time, and it isn't even too long ago, but just
Yeah, right.
how different the infrastructure of how music is shared is, and
Hmm.
how new artists are found, or even what the intention of putting out music is right now. I think it's interesting how people are kind of positioning themselves as creatives now, kind of in all the spaces that encompasses that. 'Cause I think it's an interesting time because everything's kind of been unified to a few platforms now. So the way you can get popping as a physical artist, or a digital artist, or a musician, they're kind of in the same lane. And I wonder, for you, how do you kind of focus through all of that to find things that can bode well for maybe a highlight on an artist, or even just for personal enjoyment? Like, how do you find the time and like specifics to dial into what you need to kind of make something work?
Yeah, I think it's ever evolving. And I think that, even within that time period, like, it's not necessarily like, even like an A B comparison,
Mm,
like
yeah.
20, you know, 2014 to 2024,
Yeah.
like, isn't like a flip of the switch type difference. I really think like we've been in this constant state of evolution, and like,
Yeah.
technology, and, thus like the industries and landscapes that lean on it, or,
Hmm.
flow through it, have evolved equal, like, hand in hand, almost every year or so
Yeah.
since I've been in it. So I think like a little bit of it is, like, I think there's kind of two aspects of it. I think that it's constantly evolving, and I feel very comfortable in that. And
Right.
I think like, as I've seen a few, cycles, or a few, like, I've seen the seasons go
Yeah.
times,
Yeah.
like I can start to like there are like overtones in innovation. Like I think that I can see like when a new technology like shows up and where it intersects with kind of like what is currently happening
Yeah.
culturally or societally, like even if it's a completely new thing, it's probably touching on things that have been touched on before,
Yeah.
or it's like it's elevating the user experience in a way that isn't so specific to the technology, but
Right.
more so like our workflows and
Yeah.
like the flows of our attention. So, um, in part, it's just kind of like continuing to like go with the flow of how things are coming, um, and the second part of it is I think because of the time period we're in,
Mm-hmm.
um, there's just a endless amount of everything.
Yeah.
Like it's truly infinite. Like the
Yeah.
digital like catalog that exists at this point,
Yeah.
and it's probably going to get a lot better at being able to be sorted through and
Mm-hmm.
like utilized for like whether that's finding information or connecting each other, um like that's going to have its own revolutions.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think sometimes it's like there's things I just haven't dove in on because I don't have the bandwidth for it,
Yeah.
like mentally or energetically or something like that. um and it's just kind of just trying to be where I'm at and see what I intersect. Like
Yeah.
that might be like the newest app, or it might be like the oldest book I can find. And I think
Mm-hmm.
um, I feel like a big part of that transition that I was talking about, kind of like, or like as I've shifted gears a little bit, and like I think one of the things that's allowed, or just like the conditions of that shift for me, have I would say like currently I'm not very concerned about like the cultural status quo. It's
Mm.
like I I don't like at this point in time exactly, like
Yeah.
I'm not too fueled by like standing out in the crowd of what's happening in like 2024,
Yeah.
you know, music culture, design
Right.
culture, whatever it is. Um I know at this phase of where I'm at, it's like, oh, like I'm trying to like sharpen my shit so in 5 years, like I don't know, like I'll be in the mode that I want to be at with
Right.
this like new intention. So
Yeah.
I feel like I'm kind of aware of my own cycles in it all, and kind of understanding that like like I'm not at the part of trying to ride the wave where I hop up on the surfboard. I'm still kind of
Mm-hmm.
paddling out to my spot that I think like things are going to be in,
Yeah.
and and that exists like on a personal level, like to a certain degree, and then for different projects and collaborations I have, it kind those things all have their own dynamic or their own kind of responsibilities to uphold. So
Yeah.
um, for some of those projects, I have to look at it through like a more current lens, or kind of
Right.
really be thinking about how does this stand out in the
Right.
landscape. But I've gotten to really detach from it, like from a personal point of view, in a way that doesn't make me feel um, like I have something to catch up to, because
Mm.
trying to like trying to get on top of the again like the current cultural wave is a
Yeah.
beast of a thing to do, because like
Yeah.
again like there's infinite possibilities at this point in time, and there's um yeah it's it's totally possible, and people do it all the time within their like points of view,
Yeah.
and but that's because I think like that's where they are on their paths. And I think as I've gotten like I don't know, as I've gotten more years into all of this, I've kind of like started to understand like where um yeah, where my points to speak up are, where my points to like sit back
Yeah.
and start studying again are, and that's where I feel like I'm at.
That's really cool. I think inside of that, as somebody who is also coming into this kind of space of being like a somewhat professional people person, and like talking to people a lot and just listening a lot, like you said, just it's it is funny, just echoing what you said, it is overwhelming, to a very big degree, because I think a lot of it, um in the pursuit of trying to go after this idea of like relevancy, sometimes you get caught up in, and you just do too much, and then that you end up just tired because you're doing too much input. um and I think right now I'm also just personally like struggling with the idea of what that balance is for me, as somebody
Hmm.
who is trying to find myself, trying to find my footing. And then also, because of what I'm doing, just having new experiences with people who are creating on so many different planes that I couldn't even think of. So it's like my body wants to do like nine different things. And I'm very appreciative for the way that you put things in context. I know in the way that, when I was asking you the pre-interview, you sent over a playlist of things, and it just was a collection of different pieces, and talking pieces, and people who are in collectives, and singular people. And I appreciated that, even to the point of with the Polaroids. Like, you have an amazing way of kind of painting and capturing time. And I wonder for you, how did you balance it? This is a very personal question for me, but like, how did you balance that initial journey into it? Um, because now it seems like you're in a really, like you said, reflective place of making sure that your time, that you're just very intentional about it. So what did that look like in the beginning, just on a time level?
Yeah. So I mean, I think like it's kind of learning as you go. I think
Yeah.
that like you pointed to the Polaroids, and I think that example is a good one because to me it was a byproduct of there was a handful of years when I was working with Chance where um, things just went so fast,
Hmm.
and like I sometimes I compare those years to like running on a treadmill like at your top speed,
Yeah.
and like doing that shit, but also
Yeah.
like like you can't break focus because you will fall and like hit that.
You're
And
done. Yeah.
so ultimately, like there was kind of this point of time where like you know like some years move fast. I feel like I wasn't taking many photos, and like there's probably different reasons for that. I think like
Hmm.
in some ways maybe I felt like I didn't want to disrupt the moment,
Yeah.
or um lots of reasons, but
Yeah.
like I didn't have a camera or something. Like I think um, I wasn't in the habit of taking my phone out in certain
Yeah.
places. So I think like I had got to this point where I was like, what just happened? Like I was like, 3 years just went by like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, um, I started to understand how like photos could really be like these like catalysts for memory.
Mm.
And like, I feel like around that same time I had a talk with my dad, and he was saying like he was reflecting on his time,
Yeah.
like coming up in music and like being around in like the late 80s, early 90s is
Yeah.
like, hip hop was really taking hold, and like, doing shows for artists back then, and kind of what it looked like and felt like then. And him kind of saying like, I wish we would have taken more pictures, but like everyone was
Yeah.
just like too cool or too tough to do it
Wow.
back then.
Yeah.
And like that kind of rang true. And it was like, right around it was right around that same, again, like the other epiphany I was just explaining that I was having. So, yeah, I went and got this like Polaroid camera, and I just started taking them. And
Yeah.
I really like quickly started to see like, oh, like this is an archive in a way where like I better understand the timeline of like how like what I did, where I went, who I was with,
Yeah.
and like each one of these things kind of like just put another pin in the timeline of like my own memory. So I've really enjoyed it as like a utility too,
Yeah.
and like there'll be points where like I'm telling a story to my girl, and I'll pull up my Polaroid like page and just be
Yeah.
like, it's this person and then this person,
Yeah. That's so
and
cool.
like it's used as like putting a face with the name in these
Yeah.
stories. So but a lot of this stuff like was in reflection of its absence, or
Yeah.
like
Mm.
um like one of the things I've been doing a lot over the last year or two has been sketching again and trying to like just like draw my own prototype for
Yeah.
designs, and something that I think because I work so closely with so many talented visual artists and illustrators and graphic designers,
Yeah.
um, and like I'm a huge fan of like those spaces, or those like of those disciplines, and like out of respect for them, I almost was like, oh, I could never do that. And same thing with
Mm.
photography. I think
Mm.
like um, I was just like, I'm gonna let the people who are mastering their craft take the photos
Yeah.
or do the designs,
Yeah.
and then I think just it got to this certain point where like in practice, I was seeing like, through conversations with artists or through, working on different types of projects and, different roles, um, like my creative lens or, my taste come into play where it's like,
Yeah.
um, you know, sometimes it was folks asking me for my point of view or like, you know, or it'd be me, like them explaining something and me registering a reference that I had seen recently or
Mm.
seen in the past and like bringing it
Mm.
up and being like, oh, like this? They're like,
Yeah.
yeah, let's do something like that. And I started to understand that like that was another way I could add value, and that way felt more exciting for me than
Mm.
some of the other ways that I
Yeah.
had been, some of the other roles I had been playing. So, um, and I think I just like lived on the other side of this line of like, okay, cool, like we both agree that this is the reference, like now we got to go find a graphic designer, and like
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
cool. But like I've started to like try to reduce the like I guess like yeah, trying to reduce the gap between how far I can bring an idea before
Yeah.
needing to pass the baton to like
Mm.
to specialists to like bring something to life even further. I think
Yeah.
Mickey is a good example with building blocks.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I had sketched out some of these ideas and like a little bit of the art direction, and then I got it to as far as I could, and that was probably the first project that like I put pen to paper and
Mm-hmm.
was like, let me draw out what this could look
Yeah.
like. And
Yeah.
it was the first time I think I took like it upon myself to like do an art direction or brand identity type project where I guess was the client, or like it
Yeah.
was like after working for other artists like on in support of their creative efforts for like a decade or so,
Yeah.
like I started to be like it's just so much of what I was working on like was to appease somebody else's standards or taste, and
Right.
like
Right.
because it was in reflection of their product, and like that was cool, and I still do enjoy working in that way. But I was starting to feel like like I want something that's just kind of like my own or whatever. Like
Yeah.
I want to see what this is like if like I just drive, and building
Right.
blocks kind of became the first project where I started to do that. And um yeah, it's been great iterating and then like passing it off to like talented friends and seeing like how like what they bring back. And I think
Yeah.
again like the where the identity stands like after Mickey's hands were on it like is I feel like in a really special place. And it's like
Yeah.
I think we're probably gonna like finally properly launch that project this spring.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I just look back at some of the materials he put together like over this weekend, and
Yeah.
yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, and I really like the space it's in, as a starting point.
Yeah, I think just again speaking to Mickey Brown, I think you have mentioned in a couple recent things I was reading about focusing on just branding.
Mm,
And again, just the through line throughout the conversation, I think is just communication because that is a big form of communicating ideas and, like you
totally.
said, getting it to a certain place. And I think for the last 2 years working professionally as a graphic designer, um, has taught me a lot about the gaps in which I was communicating with in a lot of things.
Mhm.
And it really highlighted when things work now. Like when I see something I don't have to ask too many questions, I kind of feel it, I kind of get it. And I think that's what happened with the building blocks when where it landed. It was just something that I was like, okay, I see it. Even then, I was like, I see it, I get it. Like that makes
Mhm.
sense. I understand where I am. I understand why I like this. Um, and I think the branding aspect of things is such a pivotal part that I think a lot of people maybe misunderstand
Mhm.
because of the language of it. I think sometimes when you hear branding, it's like, okay, logo, colors, and
Sure.
that's it. And instead of just like, okay, the voice of the brand, what is this? What does this
Mhm.
mean? What does this mean in 5 years? As you're saying, like, what's the longevity of this? How many times will we have to touch it before we have to go back into it? Um, and I I wonder for you, just being a part of different things like the These Days mag, and
Mhm.
building blocks, and I wonder how you like what do you have to see to be like, okay, I want to get behind this.
Yeah. It's changed. I think that because my entry point was working with musicians,
Yeah,
um, and also like I had like a little. I was at my very early stages of it, but like where I intersected with working with musicians was around like designing websites and like
yeah,
concepting
okay,
graphics and um, again like also helping try to raise awareness and like I think through like music journalism there was like a sense of curation and really just trying to you know really trying to mobilize this feeling of like, oh, I like this or this is exciting, I want other people to know about it.
yeah,
And I think like and the things I had to offer were like again those skills I had started to develop, and then also I think some things that are like maybe like more soft skill focus around just like I don't know how I listen or
mm,
um,
mm,
you know where my you know like how my palette is informed or how my
yeah,
taste is informed, and
yeah,
like that's through like community, that's through family, it's through like again like just being a student of all of this and
yeah,
just paying a lot of attention and so like those were like the things I can't like I had or were developing that I intersected um, with musicians,
mm-hmm,
and for the most part, the majority of the next like decade was figuring out like how do I utilize these skills, and like even beyond that, some of it became like more like management or leading teams.
yeah,
It started to branch off into other aspects of like the skills that are required to uphold responsibilities and roles that I was
right,
finding myself in.
right,
But one of the main focuses, or like the thing that I was utilizing everything I could to like push forward were the careers of musicians.
mm,
And through that, I was getting to utilize a lot of like the same things that had interested me. Like I had made a ton of websites. I had really taken like my familiarity or my like sense of openness towards like the digital tools that were available
yeah,
and tried to figure out how to use them to like you know start email lists to send out like um, like merchandise, like drops and lookbooks through, those kind of things, and like how to set up web stores and fulfillment, and um, just again, like really utilizing these areas that I was comfortable with in service of this leading lens of helping musicians build their careers.
Yeah.
And simultaneously, like my work at that point, like it covered a lot of the bases and like took up a lot of the bandwidth of like what I wanted to do, what my own like personal and professional like goals were, but
Yeah.
it didn't fulfill them all. And I think like when I was really like deep into just working on artist teams, and this was maybe like around like 2015, where the last few years I had primarily only focused on like working with Chance, helping artists with like merch and web
Yeah.
design, and I was feeling like I was missing that curatorial element of what I was doing. I was missing the music discovery element of
Yeah.
what I had before, a few years
Right.
from like
Right.
a few years prior, and like I started to feel the shift of like what like the local community around Chicago was like in terms of
Interesting.
supporting the
Yeah.
scenes, and just again, like what support looked like from like a community
Yeah.
level. And that went hand in hand with like when um, the blog era was starting to die down. And so these days is a project that I started with a couple friends, and it was really in response to the like this void that I think like both I was having
Mm.
personally in terms of like um, like I didn't have like a funnel for this like part of what I naturally
Yeah.
do or like to do. Like I didn't have anywhere to like funnel that energy into, and this kind of like opened up a new opportunity. And there was also kind of this like general void in like Chicago's local like music media landscape at that point in
Yeah.
time that other people were also noticing, and it made it
Interesting.
it made it
Yeah.
easy, or it made it like it made sense for all of us to kind of like link up and try to you know develop something together along the way. So as far as like, so that project was kind of out of like seeing the necessity for it. Um, at this point, in terms of like what would make a project that I would take
Yeah.
on, like like what would cross my radar in a way that would like spark my interest or like want me to engage. Um, I think it just kind of falls into this idea of like, do I see where I can add value,
Mm.
and like, do I see like where my alignment
Yeah.
is, and then trying to like understand the scope of my involvement. I think like at this point in time, like I'm I'm pretty I'm more conservative
Mm-hmm.
on how much of my time and energy I can like invest in a long-term basis
Mm.
into other people's
Mm-hmm.
projects. Um, with that said, I probably talk to like, I don't know, like 15 to 30 new people every
Yeah.
month that, like about their creative
Yeah.
projects, like openly. So like I'm really like I do like to do it. I'm very much in the practice of doing it, and I think I've enjoyed this habit I've built of being really open and trying to like offer up two
Yeah.
cents to
Yeah.
people. But I think in terms of like where I am, like to what extent I'm willing to like bear the
Mm-hmm.
responsibility, or um, put it on my plate, so to speak, has changed a
Yeah.
lot. And I think yeah, at different points in my career, like those factors of like what would make a project I would want to take on versus not, like have
Yeah.
shifted a little bit with like just where I was, in my
Right.
priorities. And yeah, so like it's changed, but I think like at this point in time, it's like I feel like I have two personal projects in these days and building
Yeah.
blocks that like could really use that incubation
Yeah.
now, and I'm excited to like spend the next year or so like really focused on those. We have a finish line for these days. It's ending in 2025, and it's like the first project I've ever put a finish line on, and I'm really excited for it. And I think like so many of the music media entities or the music
Mm.
publications that I've followed over my lifetime, and like since again like dating back to being a kid, like I so much of my interests now like are rooted in being a fan, like 8, 9,
Yeah.
10, 11 years old, and like grabbing the magazines or being in even like me really falling in love with music as a kid went hand in hand with like going to the
Yeah.
store and like looking at the back of all the CD cases and like understanding like the imagery and the art direction
Right.
that was, I didn't know those words at
Right.
those points probably, but like, understanding like that the packaging and presentation played such a role in it. And then obviously like music videos were the next layer of that. But yeah,
Yeah.
the design elements and like my interest towards it, and the editorial nature of like
Yeah.
publications and like how that widen the lens of like understanding the personality and the point of view of the artist that whose music I was
Yeah.
liking. Like that stuff was always so important to me. And yeah, I think like it's cool to see which elements like um, have remained
Mm.
in my like as themes through everything I do.
Yeah.
And I think these days is really like one of those. And I think all I was to say, like I've watched publications or websites and blogs that I really like kind of have like kind of like just fall to the wayside type exits where like you know the site hasn't been updated in years and like there's no real like intention into its finale. And like I was just like that feels like heartbreaking. It feels like like a beautiful building eroding or something like that. And so like a handful of years ago I was like, you want to know what, I want to put a finish line on this. And I think that was maybe like 2019. And we were like around like the 5 year point for building blocks at that point, and or for these days. And I remember telling like the editors at these days, like, hey, what if we ended this at the 10 year
Mm.
mark? And everyone was like, no, no, no. And then like slowly but surely, like every few months, like somebody else would be like, yo, I kind of like that
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
And now I have most of like everyone's pretty much on board now, and like we're getting ready to like officially announce it probably in the next month or two. But um, yeah, I think like I've already seen like it's like the clock shift to like the fourth quarter, and like kind of like that extra energy that starts to happen, and like like starting to see that um like the wave of support available to us, because we these days has been a thing that has just been like a volunteer project that has like just consistently and with care like really covered the Chicago music scene to the best of like the contributors'
Yeah.
abilities for a while now, and have never really asked anything of the audiences, and to kind of say like, hey, we're getting ready to send this project
Yeah.
off, and we want to do it like we want to do it right, and we want to like celebrate it on the way out. It's cool to kind of see like people come in and say like, how can we help,
Yeah.
what can we do, like do you guys need this, do you guys need that? So I'm looking forward to the finish line. And yeah, that's kind of been like one of the big projects that has been like um, on my mental
Yeah.
lately.
That's beautiful the way you put that about getting it to the finish line in that way. And just how amazing it is again to see people who truly care about things being able to come together in a way to like just just looking at from the page perspectives how cool it is to see so many different faces and to be able to go there and see how consistent everything looks like from a visual perspective to the details of who's on there and why they're on there and then just their stories is really cool to see and um it's it's almost like because in a very similar way whenever I was having the idea to write a comic book or anything or something like that I was like I really want it to end just because I think um, that's just how nature is, and I think a lot of times the
Mhm.
idea of finality is scary or out of control. I think to kind of rhyme with the nature of human being, I think that is something that's kind of out of our hands to a degree, but to intentionally be like, we're going to guide this to where it needs to go and have it in the language of a celebration is really, really beautiful. And um, I'm excited to see how that get executed because everything so far has been really cool to watch.
Thank you.
Just picking up on one of the other point you mentioned in that kind of train of thought was you whenever you see something or hear something, finding kind of your place to go into it and how you can be of service to that. How do you think um, the kind of places that you were working out of, LA and Chicago, how do you feel like they were of service to you in those specific times and in your career?
Yeah, so I've been in LA for a little bit over a
Yeah.
year at this point, and I came out here for a change of pace. I think like I had only lived in Chicago,
Oh
and
wow.
I'd only worked professionally from
Yeah.
there, and um, was just like was just very at home in that point of view, and I wanted to challenge myself. Understanding that the time period I had was going to look
Yeah.
different than the one I was exiting. So um, it was really refreshing. I think in some ways, coming out here was like the exact opposite of what I thought it was going to
Interesting.
be. I think like I had a little bit of a mindset when I was coming out here of like I think I was really ready to like focus on I don't know. I think maybe the way I'll summarize it for now is like I think I wanted to make an impact in the music
Mm.
industry. I think like that's what I was
Yeah.
feeling eager to
Yeah.
do. Um, and I think part of like where that was coming from was everything that I had contributed that had made an impact on the music industry was through just different partnerships or with different teams or on behalf of different artists. And I felt like more autonomy than I had before, or like not that I didn't have
Yeah.
autonomy, but like everything I was doing was more deeply
Right.
collaborative.
Right.
So like um, I felt like I was working on my individual behalf more than I ever
Mm.
had before, and I think that was motivating. And I think there was a bit of excitement about the potential of like, all right, like let me see if I can like excel in like excel within the
Mm.
industry on my own.
Mm.
And I, I feel like I don't know, like in some ways, like that just wasn't like the cards that were dealt, and I feel
Interesting.
like, yeah, but I also think like I feel like I did a good job like following my compass throughout this whole time, and I think like I also maybe didn't realize like how much like reflection I needed
Mm.
and how much time that was going to
Mm.
take, and I didn't think I understood like also I think there's even the sense of like because I don't make music myself,
Yeah.
like I think again I started to disconnect, or I think the thing that started to merge is like I want to make sure I'm investing in my personal
Right.
projects or like my own um, I want to develop my own point of view and my own capabilities. And I think I started to see that to excel in the music industry in the way I was imagining it was to like double down on the thing I was kind of saying I didn't want to do
Right.
anymore, which is like focus on making more of
Right.
myself
Right.
dedicated to other people's work, and also like potentially to like institutions who I don't really agree with
Mm.
how they function in this as
Right.
well, um, but yeah, I don't know. That was a big part of like my time in LA was like has been amazing, and I've really enjoyed it, and like it's changed my outlook in a lot of ways, but also, um, yeah, again like a 180 of what I expected in some
Yeah.
ways, but like so much more of what I needed than I probably even knew,
Yeah.
and it's also just like the byproduct of things developing and kind of like taking taking the temperature of where I'm at along the
Yeah.
way. So that's the LA part of it. And then for Chicago, I love the city there, man. And it's like it can be really frustrating for creatives
Mm.
in Chicago because like access to resources are are difficult.
Okay.
It's like there's not a lot of like there's not a lot of people knocking on the door trying to pay artists for
Gotcha. Yeah.
things. And but it's not impossible, and I think a lot of artists have like made good livings for themselves out the city, um and I foresee more and more of that happening as like again like the greater landscape
Yeah.
of how value exchange through like technology and creative industries you know comes to form. But it can be a grueling like feeling for creatives who have been at it for 5, 10,
Yeah.
15 years,
Yeah.
and like feeling like there's a lot of work you have to put in to like be able to earn a living for yourself.
Right.
And so like I definitely understand that point of frustration, um but also like there's depth of valuable things there, like the depth of value things there um is also really
Right.
inspiring, like the community there, like how people will like how people show up to support,
Yeah.
as long as they like it's not a city where anyone will really do the work for you. It's like it's not a city where like people can like skip the
Yeah.
line, so to
Interesting. Yeah.
speak.
Yeah.
I think like but if people see you like putting the work in and putting the attention in, like it's a generally supportive community, and I think like that it's a great place to like form your
Yeah.
craft, and it's a great place to like um, figure out like what your point of view is as an
Yeah.
artist. And yeah, so I've really liked those elements, and I think like I've really tried to focus in the last few years on this idea of like where do I add value, and
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
both really trying to pinpoint it,
Mm.
like trying to think back to like conversations I have and think back to projects and be like, when did I see someone's eyes light up, or
Mm.
like
Mm.
like when did a reference come together or a sketch come
Yeah.
together that ended up being the thing that was
Right.
finalized, or like really, because I was trying I had got to this point where there was like a decade worth of work, and I had never looked back on
Right.
it because of just again the treadmill thing. And when I was looking back on it, I was like, I don't totally know what I did when,
Yeah. That's crazy.
or like it was hard to feel it
Yeah.
out. So like I really had to like spend time kind of like dissecting it, and like and just starting to like live with those lenses on of like I think I started to see myself be like, I want to be a really good artist manager,
Mm.
or I want to be like the best I can be at helping artists with their merchandise, just because like I want to do a good
Right.
job on
What you do, yeah.
anything that I yeah, and and want everyone who I've like agreed to work with, like it's because I want them to win
Yeah.
and I believe in them and all that. And but then I started to like remember that like that's not why I got into any
Right.
of this. It wasn't to be a
Right.
manager. Like it was almost the inverse. It was like here's the things that I feel like I can add value to, and like sometimes those were just like the closest roles
Yeah.
available, or
Yeah.
like that was just like the hat I had to put
That's real,
on
yeah.
because that's like again like that's where things were. But like one of my friends, he's a producer from
Mm.
Chicago. His name's Odd
Mm.
Couple. He told me this the other like maybe it was like a few months ago now, but he told me that basketball didn't have positions until um, I think until it started being broadcasted on TV,
Mm.
so that people who were watching could understand
Mm.
who was supposed to be doing
Yeah.
what. And like, I kind of feel like servicing creative projects is very similar. Like, sometimes based on what the team looks
Right.
like you might be best served to like take the ball up
Yeah.
court, call the plays, and play point guard. But sometimes there might be two better point guards on the floor
Mhm.
than like is currently
Yeah.
happening, and you're best
Yeah.
suited being like on the wing or whatever.
Right.
And I think like I think that that's true with I think that's true with again like servicing the creative
Yeah.
spaces where like I think these roles are especially because in our day and age like the role of manager
Right.
as artist like can mean so much, and it like and like there's cases to be made about the responsibilities that each of these roles and the
Right.
range of responsibilities each of these roles
Right.
could be. But like there is also such a wide spectrum of like the styles of support that two people could do. And like you know again you could have a point guard who gets 25
Right.
assists a game and like two
Yeah.
points, and then vice versa though. It's like you have the person who's like they just score
Killing
from
it.
the
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
And I think that like again I started to like think about it like all right, like labels aside, like the name of these roles aside, what are the parts that I'm actually good at? Because like there was parts about the role of being an artist manager where I'm like I don't know if I'm the best suited
Mm.
like I was having to like use like my grit
Yeah.
to get some stuff
Yeah.
done.
Right.
And I was just like that's not how like it feels when I'm working in these other
Right.
spaces. And like those other spaces are where when I'm seeing people's eyes light
Right.
up and
Right.
they're
Right. Right.
them like loosen, and in like I'm seeing the value exchange
Yeah.
happen of like, oh, this actually helped them with where they're at.
Yeah.
Whereas like when I'm putting together like spreadsheets around things, I'm like I know this is useful, but like it's not kind of the value exchange is not feeling like the
Yeah.
same. So um yeah, like I've really been focused on like what's the version of my interactions, or like what have I observed from you know the thousands of conversations and meetings I've had with
Yeah.
creatives over you know
Yeah.
however many
Yeah.
years. Like you know where do I feel like the thing I do is
Yeah.
helpful most times. And like so often it's just like in
Mm.
conversation, and like so often it's just in like connecting
Yeah.
people, or like just letting people kind of like work through their own understanding. And
Yeah.
like you know I think like I don't know, I recognize how some like sometimes like my best skill as a manager was almost acting as like a creative therapist, or like in other times like my most valuable like skills to an artist were how I could help them with art direction. And it was just it was different based on who I was collaborating with and what they had in their, in their support system already, where they were in their own path of discovery, um, and yeah. So I feel like in the last couple of years, I've really been trying to be like, like I've had some artist management projects that I've been involved with and like have enjoyed, but I think like the shape of my work to come is very much less in like an overarching role or a title, and more in these kind of like, it's more I think focused on these skill sets of like, you know having conversations, understanding what an artist or a brand are looking for support in, and then just seeing where I fill in or where I see the potential, and trying to create like projects of scope, and or like with defined scope, and yeah, it's been cool. And I think building blocks really came out of that as
Yeah.
well, because it was like, I was having conversations in the apartment I used to live in Chicago, and I would just have, friends, most of them who worked in the creative spaces, over like, 5, 10 people at a
Yeah.
time.
Well.
And we would get into these like group conversations where like people would talk about like, you know, their issues with their label, or, like this discouraging thing that happened with a
Yeah.
collaborator, or, like the, writer's block, or whatever, like the things might have been. And I watched again, like that feeling, or like that shift of like people walk in with a certain kind of energy and leave feeling lighter, more
Yeah.
inspired. Like, this again, the same thing that I feel like I've been able to help facilitate on phone calls with creatives here and there, was like, oh, just do this.
Right.
Like, I it like for me, I think it became this like, I started to detach like some of the things that had previously been pretty like hand in hand.
Mm.
Like most of my work had been so attached to the music industry, or like at least through the lens, even if it was design
Right.
focused, or even if it was, art
Right.
direction focused, or media focused. It had all kind of been behind the music industry lens, and starting to detach that has been fun. What do these projects look like if I, help my friend in Pittsburgh open
Yeah.
up his clothing
Yeah.
store? Like, what do I help? What does it look like if I help my friend who is doing an art show, um, like put together like what's going to be on display at the
Mm-hmm.
gallery,
Mm-hmm.
and how do I help, this artist with social media, like this visual artist with social media, and like things that are similar challenges to that I've, you know ex- that I've worked on in the past, but through just different
Yeah.
parameters than before. And but like still again wanting to have this like, I still want to help, like I want to help the experience of artists
Yeah.
in the music industry, because like it's a exhausting, grueling like thing at times, and it can be really discouraging. But like, I don't know, I feel like I've been lucky to be close to artists who have, you know changed their lives and changed the lives of other people, like dozens or hundreds at a time, even through like what they've been able to, you know build through getting out their art. And understanding that like downside of the cycle, like, is part of it at every level. And I don't know, like again, through like the shared experiences that I've like, got to be a part of or witness, um, just kind of like echoing the sentiments that I keep
Yeah.
hearing, or like seeing as like recurring themes, and like, um, I don't know, just trying to do my piece of being like, oh, I know you're discouraged
Right.
right now, and having that conversation with them for all it needs to be
Yeah.
at that point, but then also kind of saying like, but also like this is part of the
Right.
cycle, and like this is what tends to come
Right.
next. And then getting that call from these people, sometimes the next day, sometimes the next month, but like hearing them on the other side of that arc.
Yeah.
And yeah, man. So I don't know. I really just building blocks has kind of given me that
Yeah.
vehicle
Yeah.
lately to help artists and really oftentimes help other people help each
Yeah.
other. Like there's people who end up in these conversations, like in some of the building block sessions, where I don't have to say shit because there's so much wisdom in the room
Mm.
already. And
Mm.
ultimately, ultimately artist to artist, like musician to musician, like they have a better reference point than, or like their resonance on
Right.
some of these topics is even closer than mine can
Yeah.
be in terms of like sharing valuable points of
Right.
view. So it's like it's cool to just get out of the
Yeah.
way. And so I think like to me it's just like trying to funnel and like help direct like the the creation of support and value for artists and the community. And um, yeah, that's kind of been a pretty core aspect of, I feel like, what I've always done, but how I've also of late
Yeah.
tried to like optimize that in a better way.
Man, I really appreciate you. And I think just a testament to the way that you make yourself available for people. I appreciate you coming on here and sharing a bit of your story and just your intentions. Because it does even, I think, as you mentioned, there's a lot of times just as a human, and especially as a human who is relaying their emotions to other people, and then to kind of have to twist it to think of monetizing those feelings sometimes is a strange place to be. um,
Hmm.
but then also being able to speak to people like yourself who are just like, hey, I'm just here because I've been aware of these things, or I'm here because I'm learning to process my feelings in a different way. And this is what I'm doing, and this can help you. And I think it's just important just being like, I'm here for that. So I want to thank you for that. But also just the way that you do communicate is just very, very engaging, and I'm just very appreciative again for this conversation. And I checked the time, and I realized an hour had passed, and I was just like, I don't like, I felt like I was on my second question. And I was like, this is this is great, this is amazing. And yeah, to close, I just kind of wanted to see, like, very personally, where you want to maybe see the emotional, um, kind of feeling of artists and creatives, and if there is a kind of a specific thing that you're seeing that you would like to kind of change, even if there was just the language of, if there's something that is there, like what would that be? And yeah.
I would say the biggest theme there is the validation, like just has to come from within.
Mm, mm,
And in this time period, I do think it's like we have maybe the best awareness
yeah,
of that need, because like we've all just lived through what the last 5 or 10 years of like the digital
yeah,
landscape has looked
yeah,
like. um and what Instagram and like the comparative, like the comparative like mechanisms that just exist by the nature of like side by siding by siding by siding like different pictures and realities. um and like how that can just be strenuous to like people's mental health, like um and then also like in an industry, like again mostly speaking from the music lens, but as I start to widen my own lens and catch up on what the conversations look like in, the design industries. And, like, I have friends who are directors and friends who are visual artists who I'm starting to see like equally have their own like versions of these things that they're navigating, and their own kind of like exhaustive or like exhausted experiences through like trying to gain
Yeah.
relevancy or footing within their own
Yeah.
industries, even the ones who have had
Right.
success. Um,
Mm.
when I guess the trends I see is like when people are feeling down or bad or exhausted or discouraged, it often has to do with the fact that they're thinking about their positioning in this external industry or within this kind of like um, this wave that they're feeling like they're a part of but disconnected from. And when I feel like people are in the state that they want to be and excited and energized and proud of what they made, and um, like when things are clicking, the it's always the opposite. They're always looking at it from like here's this idea I had, or here's this feeling I put my finger on and I did it and I like it and I just want to share it and show it and promote it and talk about it. The thing I would like to see shift is just um, people being able to break those mental cycles for
Mm.
themselves quicker.
Mm.
And again, I think like we're in a good time period where there is a more generalized awareness around
Yeah.
that. And I think like, yeah, even just like going on YouTube and like searching the right few words can like help introduce you to tools or perspectives that um, can help that practice for anyone. There's just a lot of things being uploaded
Yeah.
to the internet every day, and there's a lot of new names across every
Yeah.
single space and scene. And um, if you're trying to measure yourself against like the infinite evolving like art
Yeah.
spaces, like that's like there's just
Right.
no way to win that, and yeah, that's the big shift I'd like to see for folks, and that's kind of what I would like to help. That's where I would like to lend my support, or like that's part of like the next area
Yeah.
of focus in how I use again what I've acquired, skills and points of view wise up to this point. Like that's how I want to like try to give back to the scenes that have inspired me and floated me to this point and um, have given me the experiences they have. So
Yeah. Thank you again for those words, and for everybody listening, thank you for tuning into this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. Wherever you are, day, night, evening, stop procrastinating. Get after your dreams. They're waiting for you. We're gonna see you next
all right,
time.
thanks,
All
Ian.
right.
I'll talk to you soon.
Peace. Peace.